My husband said the lake house was haunted. But the truth is, ghosts don't open wine bottles at midnight. That's the first thing I remember thinking when I heard the cork pop, a soft, familiar sound that didn't belong to a haunting, but to someone who felt too comfortable in my home. I didn't move right away. I just sat there by the window watching the reflection of the lake ripple under the moonlight. The air was heavy with pine and secrets. My name is Evelyn Harper, 52 years old, and lately, I've learned that silence lies better than any person ever could. The lake house wasn't new to me. It used to be our getaway, mine and Richard's, 2 hours north of Boston, tucked behind the cedar trees, right where the fog kissed the water every morning. Richard called it our escape. I called it the place where truth doesn't echo. We hadn't visited in over a year. Then, out of nowhere, Richard decided we should come for a weekend. It'll be good for us, he said, with that rehearsed smile men wear when they've already made up their minds. The first night, he told me the strangest thing. There's something off about this place, he whispered. Sometimes I hear things at night. A voice, footsteps, maybe it's haunted. He said it like a joke. But there was a flicker of something nervous behind his eyes, something real. That was Friday night. By Saturday, I knew exactly what kind of ghost he was afraid of. The storm came in quietly, like a secret. Wind pressed against the old windows, rain tapping like restless fingers. Richard was in the study, said he had some work calls to make, typical even on weekends. He treated life like a boardroom. I made tea, pretending not to notice that he locked the study door behind him. He used to trust me. Now he didn't even share his passwords. I tried not to think about it, about how far we drifted. About the night 6 months ago when I smelled a woman's perfume on his coat. Not mine, lighter, sweeter, younger. I told myself it was nothing. Because that's what women like me are taught to do. Smooth the wrinkles, smile through the ache. Keep the family picture perfect. But deep down, I knew, when the thunder rolled, I heard it again, that sound, footsteps, slow. Careful, coming from the guest room downstairs. My pulse quickened. The storm had cut the power, so I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the hallway. Every step felt like walking through a memory. That creak in the floorboard, I knew it by heart. The door was half open inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender. And perfume. The same one from his coat. My flashlight trembled slightly as I moved it across the room, over the unmade bed. The half-empty glass of wine, the silk scarf draped carelessly on the chair, not haunted. Not a ghost. Just someone who wasn't supposed to be here. I stood there in silence, my breath shallow, my chest tight. Then I heard it, a whisper from the closet. Evelyn. My blood ran cold. The voice wasn't mine. And it wasn't his. Richard came in a few minutes later, pretending surprise. What the hell are you doing down here? He said, eyes darting toward the closet. You said this house was haunted, I whispered. You were right, he froze. I saw it, the exact moment fear replaced logic. He rushed past me and opened the closet door. Empty, nothing but a few old coats and shadows. But I'd heard it. Clear as day. A woman's voice. Richard forced a smile. You're tired, Evie. The storm, the noise, it's messing with your head. He called me Evie. He only did that when he was lying. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly and walked back upstairs. But I knew. The real haunting wasn't in the walls. It was in his eyes. Later that night, when he finally fell asleep, I went back to the study. The door was locked. But marriage teaches you more than love ever does, including how to pick your husband's secrets. Inside, everything smelled like old cigars and deceit. On the desk sat his laptop, a half-burned candle and an envelope marked with a single name. Claire. The handwriting wasn't his. My heart sank. I didn't open it yet. I just stared at it for a long time, listening to the rain against the glass. Somewhere deep in my chest, something cracked, not loudly, not violently, but quietly. Like a promise breaking under its own weight. I knew then that the house wasn't haunted. It was hiding something worse, the truth. When morning came, the storm had passed. The lake was calm again, but I wasn't. Richard acted normal, making breakfast, humming to himself. He kissed my cheek, poured me coffee and said, see? Nothing to be afraid of. No ghosts here, I smiled. You're right. Nothing at all, but as he turned away, I slid the envelope into my coat pocket. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was finally awake, and I was going to find out who was really hiding in that lake house. Even if it destroyed everything we built. Morning light has a cruel honesty. It falls on everything you'd rather not see. Richard was already gone when I woke up. His side of the bed cold, untouched for hours. The coffee pot was still warm, though. He'd left early, like always. Said he needed to check on some property paperwork in town. I didn't ask questions. I'd stopped asking long ago, but today felt different. Maybe it was the letter in my coat pocket, or maybe it was the quiet. The kind of quiet that listens. I made myself coffee and sat by the window overlooking the lake. The water shimmered under a pale sun, calm and perfect. Too perfect. The kind of beauty that makes you uneasy. I took the envelope out. The paper was expensive, ivory, slightly perfumed. The handwriting soft, curved letters. Claire, that name sat there like a bruise I didn't remember getting. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Richard standing by the dock of this very lake house, smiling, holding a woman close to him. Younger, blonde, with eyes full of something I used to have, belief. The back of the photo had a note in her handwriting. Forever our secret. See, I stared at it for a long time. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just felt hollow. Like grief had finally found its shape. I thought of the nights Richard came home late, smelling faintly of lilacs and guilt. Of the phone calls he'd take outside, the business trips that didn't add up. Of the way he'd pull away from my touch, saying he was tired, and I realized something terrible. He wasn't afraid of ghosts. He was afraid I'd meet one. Around noon, I drove into town. It was small, just a diner, a post office, and a hardware store with a faded blue sign. I ordered pie at the diner, pretending to be just another stranger passing through. When I asked about the lake house, the waitress, a kind-faced woman named Martha, smiled. The Harper Place? Haven't seen you two around in a while. How's Richard doing? Still with that new assistant of his? I froze. Assistant? She nodded, lowering her voice like it was gossip too good to waste. Sweet girl. Claire, I think. She came by with him a few times. Thought she was your daughter the first time. I smiled politely, like my heart hadn't just torn in half. Oh, right, Claire. The word tasted bitter when I got back to the lake house. Richard's car was in the driveway. He was outside, chopping wood like a man trying to look innocent through manual labor. How was town? He asked. Quiet, I said. Good, you needed some air. He looked tired, but there was something else there too. A flicker of panic. He knew I'd seen something. Maybe not what, but something. I handed him a glass of water. You mentioned voices last night, I said casually. Still think the house is haunted? He chuckled, a little too forced. You're not gonna start with that again, are you? No, I said softly. I think the ghost already left. He looked up sharply, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I smiled. Just a feeling. I walked back inside before he could ask more. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to know yet. Not until I had all the pieces. That evening, I explored the guest room again. The air still carried that same perfume, faint, floral, haunting. I opened the closet, tracing my hand along the wall, the wooden panels. Something felt off. I knocked lightly, hollow. There was space behind the wall. I pulled at the edge of the panel until it shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Inside, dusty boxes, old blankets, and a small silver locket hanging from a nail. I opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Richard and the same woman from the picture, Claire, and behind it, something else. A folded note, written in the same delicate handwriting. If anything happens to me, he'll say it was an accident. Don't believe him. My breath caught. I read it again. And again. The words felt like ice pressed against my heart. Claire wasn't hiding. She was gone, and Richard's ghost story was his cover. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had started again, softly at first, then heavier. The whole house creaked like it was remembering something. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again, slow, deliberate, downstairs. I knew it wasn't Claire. I knew it wasn't a haunting. It was Richard. I crept to the staircase and stopped halfway down. He was in the study again, whispering into his phone. I couldn't hear every word, but one sentence cut through the rain. No, she doesn't know yet. I'll handle it before Monday. Handle it. Like I was a problem. I pressed a hand over my mouth, steadying my breathing. He ended the call and poured himself a drink, staring out the window like a man rehearsing his next lie. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not anger, not fear, something sharper, purpose. If he thought I'd believe his stories about ghosts and noises, he didn't know me at all. He buried something here. And now, I was going to dig it up, piece by piece, lie by lie. Because the truth wasn't haunting me anymore. I was haunting him. By Sunday morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. I spent most of the morning pretending to read by the window, though the words on the page blurred into nothing. My eyes kept drifting toward the study door, half expecting it to open, half hoping it wouldn't. Richard was quiet that day, quieter than usual. He moved through the house like a man trying not to be seen, avoiding my gaze, keeping his distance. He didn't know how much I'd found. Not yet, but I could feel his fear. It lingered in the way he spoke, in the way he didn't. I waited until he left for a run by the lake. His daily ritual of pretending life was still under control, and then I went into the study again. The desk drawers were locked. I remembered the small silver key on his keychain. Last night, while he slept, I'd made a copy. Old habits from a marriage built on half-truths. Inside the drawers. I found what I expected: receipts, documents, a few personal notes. But at the bottom of the second drawer, hidden under tax papers, was something else: a phone. Old, cheap, the kind you buy when you don't want to be traced. It still had a few messages. The first one was from 6 months ago. "Claire, you said you'd tell her, Richard. You promised." Then a reply. "Richard, please, not now. It'll ruin everything." Another message. "Claire, I can't keep living like this. I deserve more than being your secret." And the last one, dated the night before she disappeared. "Claire, I'm going to tell her. I can't stay silent anymore." No reply. Just silence. I felt my throat tighten. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry, not yet. Because now I knew what the haunting really was: guilt, his guilt. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the lake. The water looked darker than usual, calm but deceptive, like the truth itself. I traced the shoreline with my fingertips. Remembering how Richard once told me the lake keeps secrets, I used to think that was poetry. Now it sounded like a confession. Near the old dock, I noticed something I hadn't before. A section of the wooden plank slightly warped, newer than the rest. When I knelt to touch it, the faint scent of bleach rose up, masked by the wind. My stomach turned. Something had happened here. I sat there for a while, the breeze pulling at my hair, my heart pounding softly in my ears. I could almost hear Claire's voice again, faint, broken. Don't believe him, and I didn't, not anymore. When Richard came back from his run, I was sitting by the fireplace, staring at the flames. He tried to act normal, even cheerful. "You know, we should stay another night," he said. "Maybe we can start fresh." I looked up slowly. "A fresh start? That's an odd thing to ask in a haunted house." He laughed, uneasy. "You and that ghost story again." "Funny thing about ghosts," I said, eyes still on the fire. "They don't lie, they just linger." He studied me, trying to read my face. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I whispered. Just thinking out loud, but I could see the fear creeping in, subtle but there. His hands trembled just slightly as he poured himself a drink. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The house made its usual noises, wood settling, wind brushing the windows, but beneath it all, I felt something deeper. Not fear, but presence. Like the truth was circling closer, waiting to be seen. At around midnight, I went outside. The moon was high, silver light spilling across the lake. The dock shimmered faintly under the reflection. I walked toward it, barefoot, the boards creaking under my steps. When I reached the end, I stood there, staring down at the water. My reflection wavered beside another, faint, flickering. For a moment, it almost looked like her. "Claire, maybe it was my mind. Or maybe she was really there, asking me to finish what she couldn't." I whispered to the wind. "I'll find out what he did to you. I promise." And for the first time in months, I felt something like purpose. The next morning, I drove into town again. This time, not for pie, but for answers. At the diner, Martha wasn't there, but a young man behind the counter recognized me. "You're staying up at the Harper place, right? Cops were there last summer asking questions." I froze. "Why?" He shrugged. "Some woman went missing. They said she was renting one of the lake cabins. Never found her. People say she drowned, but..." He leaned closer. "Her car was never recovered. And the guy she was seeing left town right after." My heart pounded. "Do you know her name?" He thought for a moment. Claire Sutton, I think." I smiled faintly, though my hands trembled around the coffee cup. "Thank you." When I drove back to the lake house, Richard was standing outside, waiting. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Where were you?" "In town," I said. "Doing what?" "Catching up on old ghosts." He flinched, just slightly. And that told me everything. That night, I made dinner, lit candles, played his favorite old jazz record. I acted normal, loving, familiar. He smiled, relieved. "You're in a better mood." "I am," I said softly. "I've been thinking about what you said. About starting over, yeah?" "Yeah." I poured him wine. "But first, I think we should talk about Claire." His hand froze around the glass. The color drained from his face. "Evelyn." "Don't," I interrupted quietly. "Not yet. Let's finish dinner first. I want to remember how it feels, pretending we're still happy." We ate in silence, the air thick with tension. When he finally set down his fork, he looked at me like I was a stranger. "What do you want from me?" he asked. I smiled faintly. The truth, that night, after he went to bed, I stood outside again, by the dock. The wind was colder now, carrying whispers that weren't quite words. I knelt and touched the warped planks again. For a second, I thought I heard something beneath, faint, hollow, like the lake itself was trying to speak. And deep down, I knew. Whatever happened to Claire, the lake was keeping it for him, but not for long, because tomorrow, I was going to make him face the one thing he buried deeper than her, his guilt, and this time, the haunting would be mine. Asterisk morning light seeped through the curtains like truth through denial, slow, patient, unstoppable. Richard was still asleep beside me, one arm draped across the bed, his face peaceful in that dishonest way only liars manage. For a moment I just watched him, wondering how many times I'd mistaken calm for goodness. It struck me then, love blinds you not because you don't see the truth, but because you keep forgiving it. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and made my way downstairs. The air in the lake house felt different, less haunted, more aware. The floorboards whispered under my feet, as if they'd finally chosen sides. Today was the day. I brewed coffee, poured 2 cups, and waited. Outside, fog rolled across the lake, thick and white, swallowing the dock. It looked almost peaceful, almost. When Richard finally came down, he smiled like nothing was wrong. "You're up early, couldn't sleep," I said. "Too many ghosts," he laughed, half-hearted. "Still with that?" "Always," I said, handing him his coffee. "Some things never leave." He took a sip, studying me. I could tell he was trying to read my mood, to measure how much I knew. I gave him nothing. Just silence wrapped in politeness. It scared him more than anger ever could. After breakfast, he went outside to stack firewood. I followed him out, pretending to admire the lake. "You remember last summer?" I asked casually. "When we almost sold this place?" He hesitated. "Yeah, you changed your mind." "I did." I smiled faintly. "Something told me we weren't done here." He looked at me, then really looked tan for a split second. The mask slipped. Fear flickered across his face. He turned back to the woodpile, swinging the axe harder than he needed to. "Evelyn," he said finally, without turning around. "If there's something on your mind, just say it." "There's plenty," I said softly. "But you wouldn't believe it. After all, this house is haunted, remember?" He froze mid-swing. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the air. By afternoon, the fog had lifted. I went for a walk along the shoreline, carrying the old phone I'd found in his drawer. I'd charged it overnight, and now the screen glowed faintly with missed calls. One of the numbers matched a contact saved as C. I called it. No answer. Just a soft click, then a voicemail that made my stomach twist. A woman's voice. "Claire's Richard, please. I can't keep quiet anymore. I know what you did. I can't live with it." The message ended abruptly, like it had been cut off mid-breath. I stood there, the wind brushing against my face, the phone heavy in my hand. Somewhere behind me, the screen door creaked open. "Richard, what are you doing out here?" His voice was too calm. "Just taking a walk," I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. "Thinking about Claire." He froze again. "Why do you keep bringing her up?" "Because she was here," I said. "Because she's not anymore." He stared at me, eyes narrowing. "You're imagining things, am I?" I took a step closer. "Then tell me why her perfume's still in the guest room. Why her name's on an envelope in your study. Why her voice is on your phone." His expression cracked. "You went through my things?" "I went through our things," I corrected. "Because I'm your wife. Remember?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence between us stretched long and brittle. Finally, he said, "She left. She got scared, ran off." "That's all." "Scared of what?" He didn't answer. The lake wind picked up, swirling leaves between us. I could feel his pulse in the air, the way animals sense a coming storm. I leaned closer. My voice calm. "You said this house was haunted, Richard. Maybe it's not the house. Maybe it's you." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then enlighten me," I said. He turned away, storming back toward the house. I let him go. The truth always runs before it's caught. That evening, I found him sitting in the study, lights off, drink in hand. He didn't look up when I walked in. "You've been different lately," he said quietly. "Colder. I learned from the best." He smiled sadly. "You always were clever, not clever enough," I said. "It took me years to see what you are." He finally looked at me then, eyes glassy. "And what's that?" "Someone who mistakes control for love." He laughed bitterly. "You think you know me? You don't. You never did." "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me who you are." He stared into his glass, then whispered, "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He didn't speak again. Just sat there, staring at the flames. I could almost see the memories flickering in his eyes, the arguments, the lies, the night he buried her truth under the water. I left him there, drowning in silence. Later that night, I wrote everything down in my journal, the photos, the messages, the perfume, the warped dock, the voicemail. I placed the journal in my suitcase, along with the phone, because revenge, I realized, isn't always about fury. Sometimes it's just about proof. And I had enough proof to make the truth louder than any ghost story he could invent. When I went to bed, Richard was still downstairs. I heard the soft clink of his glass, the sigh of a man unraveling. As I drifted to sleep, I thought about Claire, the way her voice trembled in that recording, the way her story ended where mine began. I whispered to the dark, "Don't worry. He'll see you again." I'll make sure of it. The wind rustled through the curtains like a breath against my ear. And for the first time, the haunting felt almost kind. Because it wasn't just her ghost in this house anymore. It was mine too. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes everything look older. Like it's already remembering the past. Richard was gone when I woke. His side of the bed was cold. For a moment, I thought he'd left for good. But then I saw his car still parked outside, a dark silhouette through the mist. He hadn't gone far. He never did. Downstairs, the air smelled faintly of smoke. The fireplace was still warm. A half-burned envelope sat on the hearth, blackened edges curling like petals. I didn't have to guess what it was. He'd tried to burn the evidence. But I wasn't the same woman who used to pretend not to notice things. I reached into the ashes with the tongs and pulled it out carefully. The name was still visible on the front. Claire. Something inside me went still. There it was, the last piece of his lie, and he'd tried to erase it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at that burned paper, my hands trembling slightly. Not from fear anymore. From resolve. By the time the clock struck 9, I'd already packed the car, the journal, the phone, the photographs. I placed them neatly in a small box. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. It sometimes looks like a woman finally done with being silent. The sheriff's office was a 30-minute drive through winding mountain roads. The autumn trees leaned over the asphalt like quiet witnesses, red and gold. Their beauty almost mocking in its peace. When I parked outside, I didn't go in immediately. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked far older, sharper, determined. I whispered to it, "You're not here to ruin him. You're here to set her free." But as I reached for the door handle, something stopped me. A text message blinked on my phone. "Unknown number, you shouldn't have called that voicemail." My chest tightened. Another text followed. "Meet me at the dock tonight. Come alone." The message deleted itself seconds later. The air around me felt thinner. Like the world had leaned in to listen. I didn't go to the sheriff. Not yet. Truth has its own timing, and maybe mine wasn't now. Not until I knew everything. That night, the lake was black glass. The moon hung low, smeared across the water. I stood on the dock, coat pulled tight, heart steady but loud. Every sound was amplified, the creak of the boards, the soft whisper of waves, and then footsteps. I turned. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, and Richard stepped into view. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. Voice calm but frayed. I could say the same, I replied. He came closer, the beam trembling slightly in his hand. "You read the messages, didn't you?" I did. His jaw tightened. "Then you know she was unstable. She made things up." She sounded scared, I said softly. "Scared of you," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand what she did to us." "Us?" I laughed bitterly. "There was no us, Richard. There was you, and there was the lie you built between us." He dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the dock, landing face up, lighting both of us in cold white. He looked at me with something close to desperation. "Evelyn, please. You have to believe me. It was an accident." The world went silent. Even the lake stopped moving. "Say that again," I whispered. He swallowed. "She fell. We argued. She slipped. You buried her, Richard," I said, voice trembling. "You didn't call the police. You didn't even tell me. You let me live here with her ghost." His voice broke. I panicked. "I thought if they found out, so you lied." He didn't answer. Just stared at the water. For a long moment, all I could hear was the wind brushing past my ears, carrying the weight of every year I'd spent believing him. Finally, I said, "Where is she?" He shook his head slowly. "You don't want to know." "I do." He hesitated, then pointed toward the far side of the lake, near the old boathouse. "I put her there." I thought the water would keep it quiet. Something inside me cracked, but not from sorrow, from release. The truth had finally surfaced. I turned away, tears stinging my eyes. "You're going to tell the sheriff everything tomorrow," he laughed bitterly. "And if I don't?" I looked at him, steady and cold. "Then I will." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over mine. "You think anyone will believe you? After all this time?" "I don't need them to believe me," I said quietly. "I have her voice, her scent, her ashes on your hands." For the first time, he looked small, like a man standing in front of the life he ruined, realizing it's too late to fix it. He dropped to his knees, the dock creaking beneath him. "Evelyn, please. I can't lose you." I stared down at him, feeling nothing but a strange, quiet pity. "You already did." The flashlight flickered out, leaving only the moonlight and the sound of the water lapping gently against the wood. Later, when I came back to the house, I sat by the window with the phone in my hand. I listened to Claire's voicemail again, just once. Her voice was trembling but brave. "Richard, please. I can't keep quiet anymore. I know what you did." I closed my eyes, whispering back into the darkness, "Neither can I." The next morning, I'd go to the sheriff. But tonight, I wanted him to feel the weight of what was coming. Because real punishment doesn't start with handcuffs. It starts with silence. with knowing that your secret is no longer yours alone. And as the wind moved across the lake, I felt her there, Claire, watching, not haunting me anymore, just waiting for peace. Asterisk morning arrived like a confession, slow, hesitant, and gray. The lake was still, heavy with fog, like it, too, was waiting for something to end. I barely slept. The house felt far now, stripped of illusion. Every wall whispered fragments of lies I had once believed. The pictures on the mantel, our vacations, our smiles, all of them looked staged. Props from a play that was finally over. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though I didn't drink it. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Today, the truth would stop hiding. Richard didn't come home that night. I half expected the police to call first. Maybe they'd find his car by the dock. Maybe he'd run. But part of me knew he wouldn't go anywhere. Men like Richard don't run. They manipulate until the last possible second, believing charm can undo sin. At 8 a.m. his headlights cut through the fog. I watched him pull into the driveway, step out, and straighten his jacket like nothing had happened. He came inside quietly. The air between us felt brittle. You didn't sleep, he said. Glancing at the untouched mug on the counter, neither did you. He hesitated, his eyes searching my face. I thought about what you said. Good, I replied. Because the sheriff's expecting us. He froze. You didn't, not yet. I wanted to give you the chance to do it yourself, he exhaled, almost laughing. You really think anyone will believe a story this insane? A ghost, a dead woman, secret messages? They don't have to believe the ghost, I said softly. Just the body you left behind. He went pale, realizing I had gone to the boathouse last night. I'd seen the disturbed soil, the faint outline beneath the damp earth. The truth doesn't hide forever. It breathes beneath your lies until someone listens closely enough. He whispered, you dug her up? No, I just opened my eyes. He stared at me like I was the haunting now, calm, relentless. Inevitable, Evelyn, he said finally, voice trembling. If I confess, I'll lose everything. My career, my reputation. You already lost your soul, I said. For a long time, we stood in silence. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the still surface of the lake, calm, beautiful. Deceptive, he looked out the window. You used to love that view. I still do, I said. It just looks different when you know what's buried beneath it. He nodded slowly, then picked up his coat. You'll regret this, maybe, I whispered. But at least it'll be honest. The sheriff's office smelled like coffee and dust. The deputy offered me water. I declined. Richard sat beside me, silent, his hands clasped like a man waiting for a verdict that had already been written. When the sheriff walked in, I didn't speak first. I wanted him to. Richard cleared his throat. There's been an incident. A long time ago, his voice cracked. A woman named Claire Reddington. She died at the lake house. It wasn't supposed to happen. The sheriff leaned back slowly. And you're just now reporting this? Richard's jaw clenched. I panicked. I buried her near the boathouse. I finished his sentence quietly, that no one would ever find out. The sheriff's expression darkened. He signaled to his deputy. Within minutes, the room filled with the sound of radios and boots moving fast. It was done. Richard didn't look at me as they led him out. He didn't plead or curse, just glanced back once, eyes hollow, like a man finally seeing the ruin he built with his own hands. When the door closed behind him, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not joy, not triumph. Just stillness. Later that evening, I went back to the lake. The mist had lifted completely. The water shimmered beneath the fading sun. I brought white lilies, the kind Claire once loved, according to her sister's old message. I knelt near the boathouse and placed them gently by the water. I kept my promise, I whispered. You're free now. A single breeze moved across the surface, rippling through the reflection. I don't know if I believe in spirits, but that moment, it felt like someone exhaled. I sat there until the light turned gold. When I returned to the house, I opened the windows for the first time in months. Fresh air poured in, cold and alive. The curtains moved like they were breathing again. On the table, the old voicemail phone still blinked. I played it one last time. The message from Claire, her voice trembling but steady. Richard, please, I can't keep quiet anymore. I know what you did. This time, I didn't cry. I smiled faintly, whispering back, you don't have to. Then I deleted the message. Not to forget, but to release it. The truth had already done its work. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the reflection of the moon dance on the water. For the first time, the lake didn't look haunted. It looked at peace. They'd call me tomorrow, I knew. Statements, paperwork, news headlines. Local architect confesses to woman's disappearance. The world would finally learn what had been hiding under all that calm beauty, but none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that silence had broken, that lies had drowned, that I had survived it all, quietly, patiently, with dignity intact. And as the clock ticked softly, I whispered to myself the words I had needed to hear for years. You're free too. Evelyn, the wind rustled the trees outside, almost like an answer. And for the first time since I moved into that lake house, I finally believed it wasn't haunted anymore. It had just been waiting, like me, for the truth to come home. Asterisk, did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you felt Evelyn's pain, if her quiet strength touched your heart, you can support me by sending a super thanks. It truly helps me keep bringing more powerful, emotional life stories your way. Thank you so much for your love and support. It means the world to me. I can't wait to read your thoughts about this story in the comments below on your screen right now. You'll see 2 new life stories I really recommend, each one filled with truth, emotion, and mystery. There's so much more waiting for you on my channel, so don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family of story lovers. Until next time, with love and respect, I'll see you in the next life story.